Hello, and welcome to Locutors of Trek, the podcast where we talk about the people, places, and things of Star Trek. So, replicate yourself a Romulan ale or your synth selection of choice, and join us far beyond the stars.
Locutors of Trek.
Program initiated. Enter when ready.
Hi, it's me, Dave.
And I'm Davin.
And we are Locutors of Trek.
And Plain Simple Tailors.
Welcome back. Welcome again. This is our second volume of episodes. We're moving right along. We finished our
We're out of our NX phase.
That's the way to put it.
We are now the USS Locutors of Trek.
That's right.
On hopefully a 5-year mission.
NCC,
Or
insert numbers here.
Probably more the ongoing mission style.
That's right. A continuing mission. And
that's the word I was looking for.
Speaking of mission, our topic tonight, we're turning to religion. So what do we say off the bat to frame this? You know, the eminent critic of culture and scholar Giorgio Agamben criticizes the way in which it's possible to describe religion from its Latin root, re and legat, as a binding together, almost like a boat searching for a harbor, a safe mooring, a salvation that's sought as a certain kind of end or purpose or goal, but is beyond all reckoning and prior to all fixity. So Agamben points out that this sort of philological treatment of religion risks being worse than incorrect. It could actually be insipid, right? It just lacks all the flavor of human spirituality in action. And so what he says is very interesting. In a book of essays called Profanations, he writes, it comes instead from relegere, which indicates the stance of scrupulousness and attention that must be adopted in relations with the gods. The uneasy hesitation, the rereading or relegere, before forms and formulae that must be observed in order to respect the separation between the sacred and the profane. And that demarcation inside some sort of assumed unity seems to be one way, I think, in which Star Trek does come at religion. But we're going to see a number of different approaches, and interestingly, we'll have to take a stab at whether and what religiosity there is in the Federation and what shape it might take, especially, I think, interestingly, among humans.
Luckily, well within our realm of qualifications.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, we've taken our dart, we've thrown it at the board, and we're experts this week.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. But before we get into our expertise of the week.
All right.
As many of you may know, if you've listened to our first episode back in the Negvar days. The Negvar days.
Oh, man.
Good times.
Okay, we'll have to stop. We'll just stop there. We'll get carried away if we don't.
We will get carried away. Sometimes we like to play a little game before we get into the topic.
Well, that's right.
And in our first episode, we played a little game called Rename Simple Tailors. We being the Plain Simple Tailors, because we bandied about some band names and song ideas, and still do to this day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So do you want to go first, or do you want? Yeah, why don't you go first?
I can rename Simple Tailors.
All right.
Okay. I'm thinking kind of I don't know. I'm almost thinking kind of a Beastie Boys type thing, maybe.
Ooh.
Where you've got a little bit of hip hop in there. You've
till
got some
Denobula.
in style of music. And I thought we could call ourselves the Warp Core. Core, Corps.
Nice.
Album, Intermix Radio.
Very nice. Very nice.
We have songs like 99 Problems, but a breach ain't one. And the hit.
for
You know,
27 hours.
a humming tune.
Yes, a humming
A
tune.
good old
Very
classic
good.
humming tune.
Nice. Well, coming off that technological bent, I could follow you in that with my possible title called the Neo-Nanite Consortium. This is a new collective, and their name of their first album would be Tiny Moving Parts.
They being us,
Yeah,
of course.
of course we would have to represent ourselves as a collection of nanites, a symphony of action, as it were.
Yes. I like that one. Always wanted to be a nanite band.
Indeed.
Okay, well, what if we did kind of some old school hip hop for a little while?
Okay. Okay.
I think you're like, maybe your late 80s hip hop kind of thing.
Maestro.
And we call ourselves Hugh Hive Crew.
Ooh, very nice.
Album, Band in the Collective.
Nice.
Songs like Miso Borgi and Borg It On Down. I think we could do it.
I want to do it.
Borg Band next Halloween.
Oh, all right. Next on our list, from one of the newer members of Starfleet that we met in Lower Decks, at least in tribute to them, is Exo Romp.
Oh, that's a good one.
With a first album called Build the Future, the single called Highly Adaptable.
Highly adaptable, like our band names.
That's right. That's right.
Exo Rompin'.
Indeed. Exo Romp.
Well, what if we did like a string thing, all strings?
Okay.
Okay. The Soulless Minstrels of Orthodoxy.
Could just rework Orthodox chants as string tunes.
Yeah. Album, Cellular Regeneration and Entertainment Chamber Music.
Volume 1.
Songs like We Are Out of Money and Do You Want to Die?
All right. I really like that one.
You know, string epics.
Oh, yeah. String theory. Very important.
That's a good one, too.
My next one is sort of like, it's like a revival band, or not a revival, but it's like a retro band. Retro is the word I'm looking for. It's going to be called the Rasmussen Time Trap. First album called Atlantic City Rear View. And the lead single, I didn't steal that.
Songs like I'm from the future.
Wouldn't you like to know?
You should see New Jersey in the future. Well, that was fun.
Indeed.
We're going to have to get busy on writing a lot of these songs, though.
I know, man. There's some of these I really want to do.
Too.
Once we finish that B. Shaps album, anyway.
Right, we got to get back to the B-Shaps.
That's true.
Yeah.
Man. Well, let's move along.
We're still on the second shaft.
It is very shappy.
All right. Well, we should chap to it here.
All right.
Well, Dave, you're going to carry a lot of this episode, as Dave does have more expertise in this field by far than I do.
Yeah, I suppose it's true. I've mentioned before I do some counseling work. My particular role in counseling is as a healthcare chaplain, so I tend to take care of people's psychosocial and spiritual and sometimes religious needs. So I do have a kind of a professional acquaintance with the subject matter, yeah.
And I believe you wanted to start us off with maybe a definition or two. Or
Sure. The real challenge,
religion v. spirituality. Or...
yeah, of the topic exactly is this distinction which has cropped up increasingly in over the 20th century, let's say, and even more in the 21st. But I think when we see the culture of the Federation also has come to a kind of fruition, or a certain kind of fruition there, which is this growing distinction between what we could call religion and the more wide or broader term of spirituality. And so just to put it straight out there, religion would refer to either sets of explicit practices or beliefs. Sometimes they're embedded beliefs like what we grew up with as a kid, and we may or may not hold on to a whole lot of it now. Or sometimes they're much more overt and conscious, like, you know, what you do in your temple or your church or your mosque on Sunday, or whatever day of the week it is, Friday, Saturday, take your pick.
Any day you want.
Exactly, right? Any day you want, really. So all of that in terms of, you know, specific texts that might be associated with this, practices, prayers, garments, smells, songs, instruments, anything that's going to go along with this, codes of behavior, etc., we can then conveniently group under the category, in a certain sense, of sort of religion, overt, explicit, articulate practices or inherited elements of that. And then on the other side, we might put spirituality. Now, this also conveniently has a Latin root. It comes from the word spiritus, which at its base comes from the Latin word to breathe. So in this sense, I think that's a good clue, right? It's better to take spirituality in this discussion to mean a sort of inbuilt quality of the human being that's about meaning, about our own values, about what
Connection to our own biology.
exactly our world, however we construe that, right? Our sense of what the horizon of ultimate meaning is, all of that stuff, right? That's more sort of spirituality as such, and certain aspects of that, you might say, get concretized or traditionalized into religious practices. So there is kind of a continuum in these things, but they can be distinguished fairly successfully, I think, and that may be a useful rubric for us to start with.
And we're likely to weave in and out of both of those in this episode, but probably more so religion.
And in a way, that's
practices,
easier, right? It's easier to
the-
get at concrete
Yep.
practices that way sometimes from a forensic perspective, which is, in one way, what we have to adopt with a lot of this stuff. Because we don't know all the ins and outs of Klingon or Bajoran faith or Vulcan spirituality or any of that stuff, but we've got our clues.
You don't. I'm quite up to date on my Bajoran spiritual practices.
Well, I've heard about your pa.
I told you, Dave, all you need is a good orb experience.
So,
Just can't decide which orb he wants. I mean,
I know. It's the green one or the blue one or the shiny one. Oh,
purple.
I love the shiny one.
I think maybe a good place to start is, I suppose, in as far as timelines go, from Enterprise all the way up to
Sure.
as far as we go in Picard.
Sure.
What we think is left of religions on Earth.
Right. This is interesting. That we've seen some sets of practices. There are moments with Uhura in the films. In a couple of instances, there's a funeral on Enterprise, I think, when they have to send somebody off. And a couple of places where we do see weddings as well. A couple of those.
Yeah.
So some of those functions of human life, you know, as they always joke about priests doing, you know, hatching, matching, and dispatching, have stuck around, right? Like we have still a whole lot of rituals, but a lot of the sort of explicit content of the major religions on Earth doesn't seem to be widely discussed in any realm of Star Trek I can think of. A couple of moments in the original series, like in the episode with Apollo, there's some really interesting thoughts there about that. And I think in that episode, Kirk both says, like, we don't believe in gods anymore, or we only have one god. And he goes between those in various places. But one thing you can draw between Kirk and Picard in that sense, and I'm thinking about things like Mintaka 3.
That could be pantheism as well.
Absolutely. It could be pantheism, right? There's some sense of a religious or spiritual intuition, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of concrete stuff. Now, the thing that does distinguish them, I think, is something that Picard, and I think this is consistent with Kirk as well, and true even in Benjamin Sisko, particularly at the beginning of his tenure at Deep Space Nine, is that humans seem particularly leery of religion understood as superstition. And I think that would be a way to characterize one element of the human sort of spiritual or religious impulse in Star Trek, is in this sense a real wariness of superstition.
Yeah, it's that Klingon superstition from their kind of religious background that seems to jive the worst with Starfleet. And
Like in the sense of Davy Crockett at the Alamo, the way Worf puts it. Right. Do
Yeah.
you believe it?
exactly.
Then of course it's true. Yes.
But they're just what?
They're like that. Yeah.
No, but how do we want to win? I like Worf. They cannot win
Yeah, that's the story.
unless they can get more men.
But yeah, I mean, and Worf's take there that the myth or the story, the epic tale, the Bowie at
Alamo.
Sorry, Alcatraz, and the at Alamo, or the defense of Narendra 3 might be a good just Federation example, or any of these things, the Sermon on the Mount, whatever you want to call it. These stories, if they don't communicate anything in themselves, then frankly they're not much of a story, and why are you listening to it in the first place? Like there is a sense in which there's this dimension of truth called narrative truth. In real world terms, that's rooted most directly in concrete experience in the outcome of the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in South Africa, where there were whole they talked about the experience of the people under apartheid and how to begin to heal in ways that say, yeah, there's the factual level of like, can we determine what happened where and when, to whom and how, and what the details were. Then there's the level of what does that say as a political or a social reality. Then there's, the memories and the stories of the people. And then what does that do to the spirit, the ethos of a place that has lived this way, right? And that's another level of truth, that sort of mythical or storytelling level of truth that isn't is often counterfactual, but nevertheless communicates a true thing. It's like when you have a story with talking animals, you know that you're in that kind of territory right off the bat often enough, And, I take the story of things like the Klingon heart to be like that as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the more straight-up religious ceremonies that we see in Star Trek, really.
One of the most articulate.
Wedding of Jadzia and Worf.
Yeah. It's
awesome.
A beautiful ceremony. Man. Yeah, and really it puts flesh on the bones of Klingon culture that we've kind of glimpsed from far off many times.
And their religion.
Absolutely.
Because it talks about slaying the gods.
Yeah.
That they slayed their gods, and the Klingon heart sort of became the god.
Exactly, right?
And then kind of Kahless.
It becomes its own kind of generator of what's going to be valuable and meaningful in the world, right? It's a true kind of Nietzschean Übermensch moment. And then comes Kahless. And Kahless complicates everything in these really interesting ways.
But he's what, a lot of religions have, is they try to, embrace some real life figure.
Sure.
That embodies that religion, or
and we pick our heroes and our saints as well that way too, that they embody something that speaks to us. That often leads to uncomfortable moments with heroes and saints when we realize that they also could be pretty crabby when they hadn't had lunch yet, or had done some really bad things, or whatever. There's those sort of those problems of iconography and living that I think we constantly struggle with in that with that myth making capacity we have, that storytelling ability.
Yeah, the only other direct mentions of religion on Earth I can think of is Joseph Sisko quotes the Bible, of course.
Sure.
And surprises Ben with that. And
I
also,
think Keiko talks about the tea ceremony at one point, doesn't she?
Yeah, she seems to be quite well, was that for her wedding? There were some ceremonies.
Yeah, but there's
we saw
lots
there.
of religious significance and cultural, spiritual significance to the Japanese tea ceremony, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so that's another good one. But also, Phlox talked about.
Oh yeah.
Visiting Earth and spending time in a temple in Nepal, a Buddhist temple, I believe, and also going to Mass at St. Peter's Square.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So,
So it's clearly...
They're still going strong in Enterprise's day.
Yeah, and I imagine that much like we see even now in terms of those of the big institutional religions in the world, there's both diminution in some parts of the world, radical diminution in the West, let's say, just for a shorthand, and radical explosions of religiosity and religious activity in South and Latin America, in Africa, in parts of Southeast Asia, in the Middle East in general. There's huge amounts of activity. I think it's still the case that something like 80% of the world's population identify themselves as spiritual, yes, but like you're religious. Whereas that number switches when you come into westernized countries. In large part, the number of what we would call the people who identify themselves as nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S, in terms of religion has been growing by leaps and bounds, or spiritual but not religious has been growing as a category by leaps and bounds in the West. So there are these interesting dynamics that are in motion, and I wonder if some of that might play out as well, where some institutional forms may fall away by particularly, say, the 23rd or 24th century, but there may certainly be areas like, I imagine there's a colony out there on some planet that's some sort of a Hutterite or Mennonite or an ashram out there somewhere.
Yeah, we've certainly seen those breakaway factions.
Absolutely, and those kind of independent-minded colonies that want to live their own lifestyle are free to go settle an available colony world if they can sort of get the gumption up to go. So I'm sure there are communities like that, right? Even the I forget the community that
the no technology community.
Exactly, on Deep Space Nine, where they've got the dampening field, has a certain kind
Cisco in the box.
Yeah, it has a certain kind of ethos, which is, as you can see, fomenting or fermenting maybe into a kind of increasingly warped spirituality.
And that turned out to be a bit of a nefarious one person.
Oh, yeah.
Who, it was her philosophy, and she forced it on
And she was going to write it on the story of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
With no uncertain terms. And had already written it on their bodies with the box for years, right?
Yeah,
those kind of
she might fit
depredations.
the category of a cult leader.
Exactly. And we see a number of people like that. I wonder if Terra Prime, in Enterprise wouldn't have had both secularist but also ultra religious components.
That would make sense. Yeah.
That would have their own reasons for working together to keep Terra pure and free of aliens and all that stuff. Even though
people
many
that are
major
particularly
religions,
xenophobic for whatever reason.
Absolutely. Most of the major religions today have come out and say, if and when we do figure out that there's aliens and we start talking to them, yes, we're going to be happy to talk to aliens. Well, the Catholic Church has already said, the aliens they're just the same as anybody else. They're just moral creatures, so there you go.
Well, funny you say that, and we were talking about flocks there. Mm-hmm. I wonder if the Denobulans might be one of the examples of a pantheist society, because they gave up their what do they say? They gave up their religion basically as soon as they found out they weren't alone in the universe. But Phlox, on his short time, I know some of the things he chose to do were to go to a temple and to go to.
Sure.
So I wonder if what they meant by gave up their religion is but gave up the the structure and the doctrine of
or
their
the sense
religion.
of it that was all about sort of denobulo-centric thinking.
But not so much the essence of it. And they just view it as that's what humans are trying to do when they go to a temple. And that's
Sure. And there's a very kind of one of my favorite lines in any religious text is the beautiful line in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna is afraid that those who have prayed improperly will be destroyed after he's sort of seen Krishna's real face. And Krishna says, no prayer truly uttered escapes the ears of God, or escapes the notice of the divine, right? And I can very much see a Denobulan getting behind that. That kind of panpsychism, pan-spiritual interest in that faculty of living beings. You know, the other side of it
would
to
fit
me-
in with the rest of the way they kind of
Yeah.
work of including people as much as you can in your family relationships.
Absolutely, because they
else.
have that whole networked thing, right? And you know, I can see with that the Federation would also have a lot of challenges in terms of like some Earth traditions would have challenges, like material reductionism would have challenges in terms of the Vulcan Katra existing, you know, or
Yeah.
the fact of Beta Z
A lot of Vulcans
telepathy.
didn't think the Vulcan Katra.
Right? Lots of Vulcans were material reductionists at the time as well, right? They said there's no such thing as a spirit, there's no such thing as time travel,
Yeah.
which I quite liked as well.
The Vulcan Science Council has decided
Has determined this to be the
that
case.
time travel is impossible. But we just did it. The Vulcan Science Council has determined.
You know, if that doesn't count as a near religious devotion to that doctrine, I don't know what does.
So we were talking about denobulans, a species who gave up their religion when they found out they weren't alone in the universe. Mm-hmm. But race you mentioned earlier, the Mintakans, we see something potentially the polar opposite happening.
Almost a spontaneous generation of a religion.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating episode. It begins with the malfunction of a hologram hiding and force field hiding the Federation observation
Yes, they're
station.
duck blinds,
Exactly above this village on
which we
Mintaka
saw in
3.
Insurrection as well.
Yep.
That one also messed up.
Yep. They
Starfleet duck blinds aren't the
really
best.
should build better duck blinds. Or stop treating people like ducks.
I bet Romulans have great duck blinds.
Oh. They have a second duck blind out back.
I bet Beta Z has no duck blinds.
There are no duck blinds on Beta Z. There was only one wedding chapel for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Beta Z Incorporated.
Where does that incorporate?
Yeah, I lasted for a few years, but I just... The Beta Zs are very fit people.
A drive-in Betazoid wedding chapel.
More like walk through,
Oh, yeah.
but, you know,
Nude, I assume.
well, of course, traditional style. Mm-hmm. But they're all very fit people, and I cannot keep up that standard.
Well, we can't all age as gracefully
And
as
see-
Luox on a Troy.
Exactly, right? And you don't want to be a bad omen at somebody's wedding. Nonetheless, yeah. Short term, great business. Great business. But yeah, no duck blinds. No duck blinds on Beta Z.
No. But
Mind you, I
yeah.
don't think the ducks are telepathic.
No.
Never asked one, though.
So yeah, spontaneous generation of a religion.
Oh, yeah, that's where we were. Yeah. I mean, this sort of brings in that beautiful, and I think they actually use it in the episode, that beautiful point that Arthur C. Clarke loves to make, that any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
And in this sense, equating sort of magic with the capacity for the spontaneous apprehension of something as supernatural, above the created order, and so quite logically worthy of some kind of veneration.
He references the Mintakan's own ancestors in a cave. Mm-hmm. It's like, why do you not live in a cave?
Precisely, right? And this is a very difficult point to get across, but the Mintakans, who, along with a couple of other species that follow that route, look to be either a relative or some sort of ancient lost colony of Vulcan peoples.
Yeah, they say they're Vulcanoid.
Yeah. They, and I think there's another group whose name I've forgotten, and then of course the Romulans.
Yeah.
But maybe the Brune, the De Bruyne, maybe. But the capacity to, I mean, to me, it's a lovely thing, right? Because they do this thing which is at once overtly superstitious, and I think offends Picard's sensibilities that way, and really contravenes them. But at the same time, it's really fascinating in that sense that I read at the beginning that quote from Agamben about distinguishing and making sure these things are clear, right? What is the distinction between the sacred and the profane, so that we can properly operate in the space that's opened there, right? Their apprehension of this thing outside their capacity to cognize, but then the immediate ability to sort of erect something that would nevertheless hold on to it, I think is absolutely fascinating, even though Picard is right to point out to them, yes, we do exceed you by a great degree in a certain number of respects, but not in the sense that you're alive and can have wisdom and live your lives, right? Like we're not better. We just have spaceships and really cool stuff.
Yeah, he says my ancestors also lived in caves, and we
Yeah.
built huts.
Exactly, right?
Then these cool ships.
Yeah, now we have fancy space huts.
Yeah, fancy space huts. Yeah.
Yeah,
I want one. Better than huts.
that's true.
I like huts. Huts are cool.
Better than emissary. Deep cut right there.
cut.
Deep cut.
Very deep cut.
I mean the I think it's a beautiful representation of that dichotomy, or not dichotomy, but the distinction we made early on between spirituality and religion, right? Like that spiritual capacity to sort of grok and reach and just grasp outward and upward, as well as the bit that confabulates the logic in between, because we're also reasoning creatures, right? And we have that capacity as well as this myth-making, meaning-making, spiritual capacity. You know, I think when those play together, they make really interesting results. And on Mintaka, they certainly do.
Yeah, and we see a more primitive version of the same thing in Star Trek 2009. Or is it?
Or was that in
They're on that red planet. Everything's red.
Beyond, I think?
Maybe that
Was
is
the
yeah,
third
it's the beginning of Beyond.
Because they have the Enterprise underwater, I think, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as they take off, they start drawing pictures of the Enterprise.
Yes. Yeah, and they've really messed up that planet.
So likely a symbol they'll worship for some time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We might have to call that an oops world.
Oops World.
Yep.
We were wondering about oops worlds earlier. It's like, how many Federation oops worlds are there out there?
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't really talk about those. But I bet you there's more than just Mintaka and
Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, technically, Bella Oxmix's whole people
Bella
is
that's a religion. They
in that sense, an
in a
oops
way.
world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. The Capellans also have a certain degree of that. And what's it, the episode of Private Little War or something like that? In the original series, there's another planet where the Klingons and the Federation are both end up mucking about.
Yeah.
Because
Giving
the
them
Klingons
guns
are
and
exactly right.
Yeah.
Playing colonial games. And yeah, that seems to, even though the Prime Directive would forbid it, it does seem to happen, and probably is one of the reasons the Prime Directive came about in the first place. And Enterprise does some really interesting explorations of that.
True. They do some oops. There's some oops worlds in that show. Come to think of it.
Well, and even Voyager does a great Oops World episode with the Ferengi who've landed on, those Ferengi who went through the Barzan wormhole.
The Ferengis have a great oops world. Yeah.
Yeah, they've set
It's
themselves
never
up as-
oops on Ferenginar.
Well, it's not exactly an oops, no. Not on their part.
Too much opportunity. You have the lobes for an oops world then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not an act. They wouldn't. Yeah, they're not saying whoopsie
Greed
about that.
is eternal.
But you know, we were. This sort of comes a couple of brackets down our sort of discussion here about talking about what the sort of stance on religion there seems to be in the Federation, and as far as I can tell, the Federation seems to be deliberately and constitutionally agnostic, and ultimately a secularized society. Or a secular society, which in some ways I think reflects a pretty thoroughly secular human society.
But also to necessity.
Yeah,
when
and
bringing
also in
together
certain aspects of Vulcan as well. And you're absolutely right. Sorry, can you say more about that necessity?
Well, just them bringing in so many different people from so many different backgrounds.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, even whether they do or don't have any religions or not, or whatever their other practices are.
They might not take well to one you're portraying all the time, or
Exactly. We're saying, yeah, well, you're... Oh, that old posh.
yeah.
I can't imagine taking too well to that either. But yeah, I think that's another one of those ways in which the Federation can explore its commitment to the IDIC Foundation.
But we do see Bajorans in Starfleet that maintain their religious.
Absolutely.
Though it's very strange how Riker makes Ro take off the Bajoran earpiece.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't seem very Starfleet.
It's, yeah, and I wonder if that isn't a way he can operate power over her because of her past as a as getting in trouble and being a criminal and in jail and things, right? I wonder if he's not.
You got to get on board.
Like, you got to be Starfleet before you get to wear that on board. I always wonder whether that was where he was coming from, because otherwise it just comes off as a real
and a bit
real
of out of
bigoted
bounds.
movement.
Yeah.
Because I can only imagine what Worf would do to him if he decided to try and pull that thing,
crest
pull his
off.
sash off. It would be a short trip to the brig for Worf and a long trip to the infirmary for Riker.
Unless Picard did it, then he would say, if you were any other man, I would kill you where you stand.
That's true. My
You
Chadich.
cannot kill your Chadich.
I don't think that's allowed. No.
It's allowed. It's still Kronos.
Allowed, he says with air quotes.
Yeah.
If you don't get caught.
No, we've been over this. He insulted me greatly. I had no other choice.
Kronos, like the fact of the Klingons killing their gods and essentially elevating the fact of the Klingon heart and its vitality as a sort of divine force means
It's very interesting.
that there's a sense in which, to me, there's no distinction between, like, for Klingon, there can't really be a distinction between battle and politics, or politics and religion, or religion and family, or
It's whatever you can do that can display the vitality of the Klingon
Right,
heart.
like,
In whatever
it's
way you
just
can do it, music or anything.
right, business. It's all like they're all each other in a certain way, and each one of them, in a certain sense, is
Like how they look at
not distinct from a religious activity.
No, like how they look up to a great poet or a great musician. They're always talking about them like they're such revered figures.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
they
I
want to
will
be in songs.
contact K-Bach or whatever. It's like
Right.
everyone knows that guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
glory is what they're after,
Yeah.
right? And
But they do hang on to so much religious ceremony and things like that.
well, that's what I was kind of driving at, in the sense that their political rituals, which are so deeply important and stem often enough from religious rituals, as well as their many monasteries and other places, either to do with Kalis or the history of the Empire, or the other many illustrious figures, Vorcha and Negvar and many others, all of that is, in a certain sense, the kind of, it's the embodiment of their religious impulse, but just seen through the same way Klingons do everything. It's going, "Ah!" and launching themselves face first at it, right? Whereas other cultures, you think, like the Vulcans, have what seems to be a much more compartmentalized view of how they're going to do these things. When they're doing their religious stuff, doing Kolinar, or
Based around the existence of the Katra, kind of, is what they base their religion.
in a certain sense. And I think there's an interesting sense in which the way in which their ancient ancestors believed in gods has become translated into, as far as I can tell, hearing those titanic urges and feelings in themselves as almost the voices of the gods. And what we do is we become logical. And then even the gods, that sense of the sort of spiritual in them is at peace.
Yeah.
Right? Even the heavens and the earth are at peace in that sense, right? Or in Vulcan, I guess. But and then they can
even
go
if
about
they
and do their work cleaning the
did
bilge
believe
pump.
in their gods and their religion, it just wouldn't really be relevant to them anymore, as much as logic is. It's
Exactly, and
all
it's
that stuff
certainly
is fine, but logic, you see, is
exactly
really, really good stuff.
And honestly, like, if whether or not Sardok, the Vulcan engineer, is fervent in his worship of some Vulcan divinity or not, that has, I would put a large amount of non-existent Federation currency on the fact that Sardok the Vulcan is going to say that will
If
have
it's non-existent,
no
give me all you have.
effect on the functioning of the warp core. Right? Like,
Yes, exactly.
my knowledge, my effort, the work as a team, all that stuff is what has an effect on the function of the
Or
warp
their
core.
relationships or anything. Really.
Right? Like, that is what is true there. And when I go to my quarters and enter into meditation, yes, of course I can spend time with the gods. Great. But I can just see a Vulcan as saying, like, these are just not pertinent experiences to this moment.
Yeah, Tuvok's meditation
Yeah.
routine seems very ceremonial.
Deeply spiritual for him,
candles
right?
everywhere.
Absolutely.
And he's, really studying the capacity of the Vulcan mind and stuff like that when he's meditating. And
Yeah. I mean, they really have a kind of a spiritual science, very much, more than I think anything else in that sense. They're
yeah, like when he's talking to Kess, and Tuvok can increase flame with his concentration, and he was teaching her that. She's like, so you harness your inner, I don't know, Katra. He didn't say Katra, but I assume that's sort of what he's talking about,
Yeah, I don't think we had that piece of... Or no, we did have that piece of...
And then he starts to explain it as molecules. So it's all, like you say, it's a spiritual science. He's relating it to her on like a scientific level as well,
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a Belgian scientist from the turn of the 20th century and around there called Delboeuf, who had these fascinating theories about the role of intentionality as like a waveform in evolution and all sorts of stuff. But one of the things he made a lovely point about was looking at thermodynamics and saying, the weird thing about a number of this stuff is that time is rarely a real question in particle interactions. He says it's just the interaction itself. And time is often measured on the basis of those, or is not really counted, he says. So in a certain sense, consciousness is the deciding factor in the motion of the particle, or something is tipping that balance to collapse the wave function into the real, right? So he was determined that matter and mind are not different things, which I think would really appeal to a Vulcan in certain ways.
Yeah.
And would also really appeal to a Federation human, I think, in saying that, you don't have to describe these things as qualities in competition or in that sort of early modern, very dualist sense that gets thrown around about all sorts of other people that it doesn't pertain to.
The Klingon idea of the heart. It's the physical heart, but it's also the
Right?
spiritual.
And it has a very deeply symbolic carriage and composure that way. Now, there's a number of species that we don't learn a whole lot about their beliefs at all. We learn a tiny little bit about Romulan beliefs, tiny little bits about Cardassian.
I did take a Ferengi religion course during my 2 semesters.
Oh, good. I know
Ferengi
very
School
little
of-
about Ferengi religion at all, other than the, Divine Exchequer. I forget what he's called.
Well, I wasn't paying too much attention because I was trying to work a few deals.
Sure.
But when you die, you go to the Divine Treasury, and you must greet the Blessed Exchequer. Yep, yes, exactly.
Hands in the appropriate Ferengi
Wrists
position.
together,
Yes.
hands open. He'll go over your profits during your lifetime to see if you've earned enough profit to make it into the Divine Treasure.
And if not, you bribe them.
Of course.
Well, yeah, it's nice that there's, mercy there in that system somehow. Greed is eternal, I suppose.
Greed is eternal.
Yeah. Now,
Latinum lasts forever.
that's true. That's true. Unreplicatable. But, so I was saying, we don't know a whole lot about the Romulans' religion. Some, but not a whole lot. We don't know a whole lot about Cardassian religion. A little bit, but more about their sort of culture and politics. But one group that we know oddly a good bit about the religion is the Dominion. Because their religion is...
Blessed are the founders.
Their political structure. Victory is life. Right? The very cynicism of the Vorta, the sincerity of the Jem'Hadar, and the implacable ruthlessness of the founders are like this bizarre kind of triadic structure theologically.
And very not pantheist. It's like
No.
Vorta's mocking the Bajorans and their like silly religions, and Damars is like, you think the founders are gods? This is like, well, that's different. He's like, how?
They are.
Founders are gods.
And all of a sudden the room just gets real
Real
quiet.
quiet. Damars is Damar wants some canard.
That's right. Yeah, the Dominion's religion is...
But they're truly their creators.
Very, and certainly it's not factually false, right? It's weird in that it's a religion whose claims are not counterfactual.
No.
And can't be seen that way because it's clear that the Dominion engineered the Vorta from... they sort of uplifted them from some kind of primate that they encountered. and thought could be useful, and clearly made some kind of, like, there's a spiritual interaction in the story that the Vorta tells about the founder being
They helped the poor
helped by them.
creature that was hurt and scared.
And they showed it compassion, and for that, this creature said, I'm going to remember you.
And take you to the stars
Yeah.
or something one day.
And the Great Link can do that, obviously. Because the Great Link shares everything. Right? There's so much that's theologically rich there, even though the trauma and historical rejection and hurt of the founders at the hand of solids or monoforms, whichever term you think is more
Sure.
politically correct, I'm sure. That's bred a theology of, or a deeply paranoid and pro-actionary theology. The Dominion doesn't wait for enemies to come to it. It sees a group, assesses their strengths, and seeks to incorporate them into the Dominion. Well ahead of time.
And the Vorta know that the founders didn't create every race in the galaxy.
Yep.
But they see them as a god because they'll inevitably conquer every race.
Yeah.
What do they always say? Oh, the founder or the Dominion has endured for thousands of years, and it'll endure long after the Federation is
Yeah, I
faded
think they
into
say that
dust
the
and
Dominion's been around 10,000 years
Yeah.
or something. And that's a pretty darn stable society. The Dominion's a very successful society. And interestingly, you think about the early structure of those seasons of Deep Space Nine when we're first going into the Gamma Quadrant, when Quark goes on that trade mission, for instance.
Yes.
And you don't...
with the Dozai.
Yeah, you don't see a Jem'Hadar, a Vorta, or a Founder other than Odo for, I think, the first 2.5 seasons of that show.
No, you just hear whispers of the Dominion.
You hear whispers of the Dominion.
To do business in the Gamma Quadrant, you have to do business with the Dominion.
Right? And that's how they actually...
Is that cool? Let me give me their number. Hook it up.
Exactly. They're looking at him like, you have no
no
idea what you're asking for.
We don't have that number, and we don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if they ever come calling, we're just going to do what they say.
Yeah.
But that's it, right? They're a shadow force that doesn't necessarily, it seems, interfere in the day-to-day running of a particular planet. It doesn't.
But when they do, you just let it happen.
Yeah, like when they do, there's nothing to stop it. Because when
we'll bring in the Vorta first. If they're not happy, we'll bring in the Jem'Hadar.
Yeah, and that's probably because there's a founder on your planet who's already known everything and knows the answers before they ever decide to make a move.
Oh, sure.
That lovely moment in Deep Space Nine when the changeling O'Brien says, how many of us do you think there are here? The other question that never gets asked there was, and how long do you think we've been here? I would guess a matter of 24, 36 months, maybe. But before there's ever any hint that they might be there, or that such a thing exists in numbers larger than Odo, they already know about you and they're on your planet.
Yeah,
because
he's
they're not
hinting
gonna
that
take
they're
any
always
chances.
there before you realize it.
Absolutely.
And it's always been that way. They show up, figure out what they need.
Yeah. But what it means is they end up being a theology which weirdly conforms to the definition of ideology given to us by Hannah Arendt in her wonderful and challenging text, The Origins of Totalitarianism, where she says ideology is literally the logic of an idea, where you start from a sort of top and build out to find a world, and anything that would impinge upon the logic of the idea circulating is kept out. And that's the Dominion in one go. They're an ideological force, and that ideology has a religious significance, which is, that's a really unenviable combination. And portends nothing but bad things for everybody involved, including the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar, who know they're just going to be cloned when they die, or when they die, they're just going to be dead. They're going to make another Jem'Hadar. But that's okay, because victory is life.
Yeah, that's the Jem'Hadar religion, because we've actually seen a few more nuanced Jem'Hadar who know what the founders are doing to them, and know why they were created, and how little the founders actually care about them. But they're like, victory is life, and they don't need to earn my trust or my loyalty, because they already have it.
And in that sense, the Jem'Hadar elevate their own faith to my mind, beyond the Founders. Because, like, the
Yeah,
thing they
they
can
do.
actually be faithful to.
More so than the Vorta. The Vorta,
Yeah.
because they have that origin story with them and stuff.
And the Vorta have this sort of inbuilt cynicism about them.
Yeah.
That serves them very well as diplomats and politicians and spies. But the sincerity and the earnestness and, like, the immediacy of the Jem'Hadar experience of the world, even though they're fiercely intelligent and all that stuff, yeah, it allows them to elevate themselves and the reason of their spirit, even though it's a cruel and totally functional, like, non-utilitarian practicality about what's going to make these Jem'Hadar do stuff with them. You know, they don't have a med bay on their ships. They don't sleep. They don't eat. They don't do, you know, they're just clever shovel, like, blunt tool instrument things to be used. They elevate themselves up to a configuration of a kind of a universal nobility in that. Even though they're pretty nasty characters, they have this sense of a strength and a consistency inside them.
The thing they share in common with the Klingons, that one, what was it? Was it Romaticlon?
Yeah.
That saw in Worf.
Yeah.
Why he wouldn't kill him.
Yeah, he says, I can't beat him. I can't defeat him. I can only kill
And
him.
how he looks down at the Vorta. He's like, you don't understand what it is he and I share, and you never will.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to get a
that's a
Jem'Hadar to
spiritual
stop
connection.
killing you is a deeply spiritual moment. Yeah, that moment is quite incredible. Because you're right. I think if the religion of the Jem'Hadar is the Founders, the spirituality of the Jem'Hadar is violence. Yeah, in all its forms.
And courage.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
last thing a Jem'Hadar can do is flinch and not charge into battle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Klingons can flinch when they haven't had enough blood wine before a battle.
Oh,
sometimes.
sure. Maybe if surprised slightly,
Yeah,
taken aback.
exactly.
But, it depends on what they do after the flinch. I think that's the real point. But this is really we're sort of, as you said earlier, weaving these two kind of understandings of spirituality and religion around each other and kind of letting them dance about a bit.
The Voth are interesting. The Saurian species that left Earth,
Oh, right. Yes.
and that we see in Voyager,
Yes.
where they have developed what seems like a religion because it overrides science and their society, is their origin story as the first species, the first sentient
Yes.
species to roam the galaxy.
Yes.
And anything that disproves that, or first species of the Delta Quadrant, I believe, is what they hang on to.
Yeah.
They don't like the fact that it turns out they're from somewhere in the Alpha Quadrant. They weren't too happy with it. It's like the Alpha Quadrant, gross. We're like from a good neighborhood, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And they're so they're 65 million years away from Earth at this point. So,
Yeah. It's a long time.
fair enough, they kind of forgot a little bit about home. Sometimes you do after a while when you've been away.
That's an interesting thing to develop religion off of.
Yeah. And, to
Being the
think that they
first.
were the most, that they had a certain kind of responsibility to bear through time, there's that ancientness is something that Trek has returned to a number of times. I think about the Iconians, the guardian of the Takan Empire.
The Q.
Yes. Sargon and his people who are living in the weird little pod things in the original series. The ancientness of things that, billions of years ago, millions of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of years ago, there were living creatures moving around, believing things, trying to make their, etch their mark on this galaxy and then maybe be remembered when they're gone. Such that even the Bajorans don't remember that Bahala was there and then can refine it. Just like we refine stuff all the time on this planet that we had no idea was there. Like all those cities they found in the Amazon when they first started using LiDAR, right? Which again is as much a set of religious sites as agricultural and ceremonial and urban sites,
It makes me think of The Chase, the episode of TNG.
Yeah.
How many religions would be based off of that story had it been known to the ancient peoples of all the planets that are connected because of whatever the species is, and the progenitor species?
Absolutely. Or for that matter, the episode Masks, right? Which is not the strongest episode, but has a great sense of that kind of looping myth cycle that kind of starts itself and ends itself, the Ouroboros eating its own tail kind of thing.
Watch Brent Spiner chew scenery to a pulp.
Just
and swallow it
whole. Yeah, I mean, great work on his part. But yeah, you know, the sense that from observing our natural conditions, you know, sun, moon, sky stuff, you know, you think back to Göbekli Tepe here on Earth from 12,000 years ago, where already human forms, animal forms, astronomical and meteorological patterns are being noticed and recorded and being construed in a frame of meaningfulness that both is about navigating the world, but also about ranging our own spirits and our feelings and our apprehensions about ourselves and our existence inside that, right? It's really interesting to think that all of those layers are present in this galaxy that our favorite Starfleet officers are tottering around in, right?
Yeah.
And that they can delve into it, all of these features of spirits of whatever kind.
Yeah, what is the Kurlan Neskos?
Oh, yes.
That people believed of the many spirits inside the one.
Absolutely. And that's, again, from the chase, that beautiful sense of, like, the past and even our ancestors being contained inside us, you know? Like we're all some sort of big volcanic island just growing bigger and bigger over time. Yeah.
Every stray thought is just another one of those voices peeping up. It's like, hey, what it's like, I never listen to you. It's like, get out of here. Here's the other guy.
Yeah, man.
But the Bajorans have to be the most religious society we've seen in Star Trek, I would think, or at least the most exploration and development we've seen.
Sure.
On screen.
And we
see their temples, their
we learn about
religious
the
leaders,
of their religious like polity.
Yep.
The Vedics and the Kai and that sort of
elections
thing. And we learn how important
and their gods. We see their gods.
Yep. And in their religious practice has been for keeping them alive as a people. You know, in some ways it reminds me
getting them through the occupation.
Yeah, the sense of, you know, the Tibetan people having a spiritual leader in exile and that sort of thing, or any of those sorts of things where the religion becomes a kind of holding together point.
I really think the way it's portrayed is quite beautiful for the most part, actually. Like, it has its connection to nature. It seemed to propel the science of the society forward
in many ways. Yeah,
like with the light ship and things like that. That was way ahead of its time. Like, you know, all these things were just informed by, you know, the prophets and wanting to reach the celestial temple and all this stuff.
And there were those other features that, and I found this was one of those most fascinating juxtapositions for me, and I found it just as a question of historical dynamics, just utterly beautiful. When the poet from 250-300 years ago comes back out of the wormhole, and comes to Deep Space Nine,
the emissary,
and considers himself the emissary, and at first,
so does Sisko for a while.
So happy to get out of that role.
Yeah,
it's like great,
a Bajoran guy. He wants the job.
I've just been emissary pro tem. This is so great. You know,
but who is it that says to Kira? So is this guy's the emissary, huh? She's like, I guess so. So they're like, so does that mean Sisko was never the emissary? She's like, I don't know. Just
I can't
whatever.
Tell you that.
Like, we're going with this guy.
Emissary.
This guy has some really nice poems.
But he wants to bring back the caste system.
Yeah.
Which clearly had disappeared.
The Jawas.
At least under the occupation. Because all of their social practices have been destroyed. But may have been disappearing before. That's unclear. But certainly has disappeared as a as a feature of life, certainly post-occupation. And the transformation of their life, and that they're not, that they have no lesser sense of devotion or zeal or interest in the prophets, by and large, is really interesting, right? Because there's lots of those things, like when a social change or a change in religious practice happens, there can be really divisive splits.
Yeah, or Federation membership. Like they were still going that way by the end of DS9, but they were not going to give up their religion.
No, not at all, right? And I don't think there's anything in the Federation Charter that would require them to.
Just take off that damn earring.
That's right. I mean, maybe if your religion involved enslaving people, that might be a deal breaker for the Federation, because we're already on the no enslaving people bandwagon.
Dave, some Orions haven't enslaved people for 5 years.
I'm sorry, I'll stop bringing it up. I can't. You're right.
5 years.
You're right. I'll do my penance for that.
And you just got to have an orb experience.
It's true. I just can't get the latch open. That's been my problem all this time.
See the way of the prophets. We haven't answered perhaps the greatest question about religion that can be answered in this episode. And I think I'll leave that for you to answer, Dave. What would God need with a starship?
Well, I mean, I think the first answer is, what wouldn't God need with a starship? I mean, starships are awesome, but...
Might be the best answer I've heard to that question.
I mean, yeah. Oh, Star Trek V. Man.
Bless it.
Oh, bless its pointy little head. Oh, there's a way in which I feel like the giant head at the center of the galaxy was kind of referred back to in the Great Barclay episode, where he becomes super intelligent. The Overmind, yeah. And brings them out to meet this species who are giant floating heads.
Yeah.
Or at least appear in their communications as giant floating heads. We're not sure which way that goes. But I wonder if there's some relationship between that giant floating head and the giant floating head that Kirk met. Because they both have giant floating head in common. And we don't meet a lot of those. This sort of semi-transparent, fantastical abilities. But
we do see that almost kind of reptilian one that's
right?
kind of in subspace.
Oh, Nagilum. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe there are creatures like that are sort of god-like in their grasp of the intricacies of subspace and quantum interactions, such that they can do these things like a Q could. That's the other kind of divinity we meet in Star Trek, is the capricious god that is a Q.
The trickster god, the Loki.
Exactly. Very much a Loki character. Now, I suppose that does remind me of the other gods we meet, which is, in the original series, we meet Apollo, the last of the Olympians, who describes the way his people existed as robust and vigorous eternally until they became unable to bear the weight of their existence anymore. And then all of a sudden they would expand out to the border of the universe and there be reunited with each other as sort of almost just particle fields interacting over all of space and time. And I thought that was just a really beautiful treatment of divinity, but especially in the way that the ancient Greeks saw their divinities. There's this beautiful line at the beginning of the Iliad of Homer where Achilles is about to attack Agamemnon because he's made off with Briseis, this girl that Achilles had stolen from her hometown in one of their coastal raids, as one does when you're an ancient Greek. And what happens is Homer describes the brief flash of insight that keeps Achilles from killing Agamemnon outright as Athena grabbing his hair and jerking backwards on it, like the hair on the back of his head. When you're just brought up short. But Homer's well aware there that he's using an allegory, an image, a simile for wisdom. But he chooses, as a Greek does, to embody or personalize or even go as far as sometimes anthropomorphizing it. That rings with me in some of these other moments as well, where there's sort of you get out beyond the distinction between what is strictly real and what is not, what is physical, what is mental, what is emotional, what is rational, all that stuff, and you just get to this kind of purity of experience.
And the Q anthropomorphize themselves.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be generally frowned upon in Q society to claim godhood.
Yes.
I mean, John Delancey Q will to say that every now and then just to get a rise out of you.
He does seem to like to do that to certain cultures sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, generally frowned upon, so they like to kind of blend in.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
which you also see in things like ancient Greek gods and things like that, where they'll take human form and just blend in with society.
Yeah, absolutely. And often that's often understood as a kind of testing, right? That they're gonna. There's the great Greek proverb, or the same thing in the early Hebrew scriptures when three dudes show up at Abraham's tent and he's like, "Oh, okay, come in. You guys could be the angel of the Lord," or something like that. There's no way I'm sending you on your road to keep stepping, buddy.
These guys seem to be in pretty good shape. I wonder if they're gods. Can't take a chance.
Divine.
Come in for some mead.
Yeah, because you never know what's going to be, and that's an insistence on hospitality, but also the basic respect we have to give any other sentient being, and maybe that finally.
And you know what? Sometimes they were cute, so they were right.
That's true. And I wonder if that isn't sort of finally the sort of theology of the Federation, if we might say it, that each of us are actually an end in ourselves. That we don't need to be more than just who we are right here to be functionally divine and a miraculous and a once in the universe occurrence,
Well, so as you may have heard in previous episodes of Locutors of Trek during our NX phase, sometimes we like to save a review of some sort for near the end of an episode.
Oh yeah.
So that you can listen to the meat of the episode and not get spoiled on something if you don't want to see it.
Amen to that.
But it's mostly kind of old comics and things, so spoilers probably won't matter too much.
Yeah, probably not.
Though we didn't really spoiler alert our Lower Deck supplemental, but hopefully...
It was pretty much entirely a spoiler.
Yeah, hopefully people caught on quick enough. We only spoiled an episode or two.
Only that many.
But we thought we would review a 48-page Star Trek Deep Space Nine special comic book from Malibu Comics back in 1995.
So just a very few years
Year
into
of
the
the
run
Cisco.
of the series. That would have been into season 2, season 3, I think.
Yes, I would think season 3. So what this is it's 5 mini stories that just all seemed like nice little cutscenes that could have been included in episodes of that season.
Absolutely. It could have been a B plot in any episode.
That either fleshed out a character relationship or just or just highlighted a character in a different way that we haven't seen. So, thought we would just talk about those.
Yeah.
So the first one is called Collision Course.
Yeah.
And there's asteroids
Yeah, giant,
hurling towards the station.
They've come out of the worm, an asteroid collision in the wormhole.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting point. I'll bet you that's what they're sitting around the writers and going, I wonder if stuff that isn't spaceships comes out of that wormhole ever, huh? Mm-hmm. And boom, you got a story right there.
Yep.
It's great. It's got a bit of a Quark and Odo angle where Quark's working another...
He's got a Klingon business partner.
That's right. He's working another partner who's taking tourists out to the Gamma Quadrant. But Odo's pretty sure he's also been smuggling some stuff out to Cardassians.
They seem to come back a little more cargo heavy than when they left.
That's right. So he wants to confiscate this ship.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're trying to figure out what can possibly move this asteroid. They can't vaporize. It's too
one of
big,
them's
they can't
huge that
phase
they
around
even
it.
can't destroy it with the Federation phasers.
Yeah,
The chief says it'd be like using a pickaxe on a mountain. It's
yeah.
not happening.
And so in the end, they decide to blow it up.
And they need a hero to save the day.
Indeed. Turns out the Klingon has been smuggling huge amounts of explosives.
Yeah. I mean, Quark knew nothing about that, though.
No, that's not his end of the deal.
No, he was just getting customers a nice,
Just
giving them
tourism.
a nice tour and giving them a bit of latinum for the dabo tables. when they
That's
get
right.
back.
That's right.
Nice evening of tours and gambling. Quite nice. All by the book, above board,
That's right.
profitable.
Quite.
So yeah, they do confiscate Clegg's vessel. Mm-hmm. Without him knowing, they just sort of Odo just sneaks onto it.
Yeah, they have to subdue him on board.
As we know, Odo is wanted to do.
It's true. Loves turning into a bag or a bucket or a
Puddle that
something.
sneaks under a door.
That's true, yeah. Good old
Yeah.
puddle under a door.
Good old Odo puddles. Yeah. And they need a hero to fly a ship through the smaller debris
That's right.
to get to the big asteroid and destroy it
That's right.
with Clegg's ship.
And who, dear listener, do you think volunteers?
Do we know of any great heroes on Deep Space Nine? Perhaps the greatest hero in all of Federation history.
The hero of Setlik 3.
Miles Edward O'Brien says he will do it.
Indeed. He was a hero.
And
He was a Union man.
He was a Union man. But they think it's suicide and nobody can do it. But never underestimate the great O'Brien.
They just about lose him in the explosion, but in the end, Jadzia manages to pull back a fairly singed, scorched, and battered O'Brien.
Which is interesting. The great transporter chief himself almost
It's true.
died
it's
in a
true.
transporter accident.
But at least they didn't forget the biggest rule of having O'Brien in the story. O'Brien must suffer.
Oh yeah, it's true.
He's so beat up in that last
Oh yeah, and Clegg catches them taking his ship.
Yeah.
He's just like, will not let you take my ship. And Odo's just like, well, you'll have a hard time doing that in the brig. Yeah,
And they shoot him with a phaser.
yeah, and just another great hero moment from the hero of Setlik 3.
Yeah, and I thought, that of any of the stories in this little issue could have had one of those others stuffed into it to be a B plot and been a great A plot for an episode.
And yeah, Odo confronts Quark.
Yep.
He's like, well, we found all these illegal explosives and things. So Quark's like, I was shocked. I was
Shocked.
what does he say? I was trusting a Klingon's honor and integrity.
That's right.
It's all
He does have
all
to
very
do business
believable
on
stuff.
behalf of the House of Quark.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. He understands Klingon honor and
Klingon
integrity,
House, yeah.
and Klingon and Ferengi integrity.
Indeed.
But nice little story. I liked it.
Yeah.
Would have been a fun episode. The next one is Frozen Boyhood.
Oh, I really liked this story.
Well, why don't you take it away?
So Jake's on a date with a Bajoran girl named Sue, who is talking about what she and her friend have been talking about, how to get a man.
And he doesn't seem to be paying much attention.
Not much. She's sort of in her world. He's kind of in his world or in this thing. But what is happening is she's wandering around his quarters grabbing items. This seems to be in that brief period when Nog is off to Starfleet Academy and Jake is living on his own. He slips into she picks something up and says, please don't mess with that. That's like my very own stuff, please. And we do get a sense of the human love of sentimental property in the 24th century at the very least. Like stuff you got a lot of feelings for, people will still get pretty haranguey about, even though probably not stuff because it's expensive or whatever. So he slips into a memory at this point of a day some years earlier when he and his dad get the call that a specific ship is...
Captain DeLuca is arrived.
That's right. They've come in, and that ship has some baseball holodeck programs aboard.
Federation
So-
science vessel USS McAuliffe.
That's right. So they rush there with ball, bat, gloves in hand and get set to play one of the greatest games in history.
The Baker Bowl.
That's right, the Baker Bowl. When Sisko's called away. Ben Sisko is called away. Jake is crestfallen. His dad says, listen, I'm going to make it up to you. I'm going to try.
The shot heard round the world.
That's right. He says, why don't you play the game? There's no sense you not playing the game, even if I have to go. Jake tries, but it's not the same.
No.
And he comes out. And later, he and his dad are talking. He said, it must have been something to really see a baseball game played.
Mm-hmm.
This is just after they found an old Earth satellite ship that's got some random stuff on it, including some CDs and radio broadcasts and a Walkman and various things.
And be able to experience it with other people and things like that.
Yeah, other people, because they're the only two people who really do baseball that he knows. He doesn't have kids to play with baseball that way, and his dad tries his best, but he can't give him anything to fix this. And so in the end, what he does do, they're going to pack up the stuff to the archives and send it back to Earth, and there you go. Sisko asks O'Brien to just make one little alteration to that Walkman for him, because the Walkman actually comes with a disc of that game broadcast on it.
Yeah.
And as we learn in the second to last or third last panel of the whole thing, as Sue is now trying to shake him out of his reverie and get him to listen to her, she grabs his hand and he moves, I think, and he presses the play button on the Walkman.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts playing. And she says, "Can you?" She's getting increasingly angry. Can you turn that off? Stop there! Oh God, aren't you listening to me? And he starts laughing. And he says, I can't."
Nope, sorry.
The one change he made O'Brien make was that when you press play, you can't
turn it down.
freeze the game.
Or turn it down. I don't think.
Or turn it down. You've got to listen to it just as it's happening.
Yep.
His dad heard him, really heard, and tried and
make it a
left
real
something with him
experience.
that was going to make it a good memory, something that he was going to remember all his life, that he was really there.
The
And it was just
Giants won
beautiful.
the pennant.
That's right.
The Giants won the pennant.
They won the pennant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The next one is oaths.
Maybe that's something that we've forgotten about in terms of
What's that?
human stuff. Some of their
sports religions?
some of their religion is sort of the past, though, right? Like and maybe that's the interest of the writers as well, their love of Americana.
True, yeah.
And that stuff. But that does seem to be a feature of Federation life, that they love the historicity of their world.
Old pop culture, if you're Tom Paris.
Exactly right. They love who they've been and who they are as well. Anyway, next story.
Oaths.
Oaths. Oh yeah.
I like this one. This one is Bashir.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very sick Bajoran.
Yeah, this girl Brinth.
Yeah. Yes. And the only thing that can save her is a Bajoran drug that he just can't get a hold of.
Yeah, they haven't made it for years, as far as anybody knows. And the problem seems... Now, you made fun of orb experiences earlier. My fear of orb experiences in particular.
But yes.
Now, what happens in this story? Little girl is sick because...
I don't recall. Yeah.
Radiation from an orb experience.
Look, you're too young. Like you're not that young anymore, dude.
Brain radiation from an orb experience.
I think that's wasn't quite determined. That was just one possible explanation.
Hesitant diagnosis. So
I mean, that's if you believe the word of the little girl. No, but being a legitimate and resourcely businessman, Quark is able to get hold of this Bajoran drug.
That's right.
From a friend of his.
A friend of his.
Also likely a honest businessman himself.
Mm-hmm. And as he does, Odo comes out of a grate in the floor, I think.
Yep.
Just as the transaction is going down, and catches the Doctor and Quark. And Quark's perfectly legitimate business associate, who turns out is a smuggler and weapons dealer and all sorts of nasty things.
Whoa, this is outrageous.
Catches them in the act.
He had no idea.
No idea. Quark is just too trusting, just too trusting.
He's just a beautiful soul.
Yeah. He's got the lobes.
Mm-hmm. The lobes for friendship.
That's true. Treat friends just like family.
But
Exploit
now,
them shamelessly.
of course, this drug that Bashir needs to save Brith is now evidence in Odo's investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So he's gonna confiscate it. And Bashir's just like, you don't have I don't have time for you to do anything like that right now. I need to get this stuff right now. And he's just like, well, I can't let you do that, Doctor.
Yeah, I've taken an oath to do.
Yeah, the law comes first.
Yeah.
And Bashir just takes it, picks it up, and he just starts to walk away. And Odo grabs his shoulder. And Bashir just smacks it away and turns around and stares at him right in the face. Mm-hmm. Dead serious.
Bashir, who as chief medical officer, does effectively outrank him.
And does not back down on things like that.
Nope.
Like he's gone at it, which is what I find interesting about this is he's had that moment with Cisco before, where Cisco's just like, give me those leaders of that stuff. He says, well, I'm gonna, and he shows down with Cisco there and says he's gonna write it up in his report and all that kind of stuff and file a complaint. Yeah. And then he has moments like that sort of with Ross.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think even Kira about Bajoran things.
Yeah, there's a number of times that he's able to stick to his guns.
Well, and the quickening and stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so Odo just stares back at him and he's just like, go, but do not put me in this situation again. Yeah. Which is a very Odo thing to say. He's just like, he will let you slide sometimes, but he hates having to do it. He does not like to back down on what he thinks is the way to proceed.
Yeah, and in the end, the funny thing about Odo is he will opt for the compassionate move.
He will, begrudgingly.
Even though he would never want to admit it.
No. But he saves the little girl, and it's very nice ending.
Yeah, great story.
Yep.
And then Bashir sends her off to thank Odo appropriately by giving him a hug.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah, the artist rendition of the bemusement and confusion on Odo's face as he's getting that hug is really a great piece of art.
Yeah, and he says he owed a debt to Quark and Odo, and he says paying back Quark will be easy. So I had to think of something creative for Odo. Yeah, it was a fun one. That would have made a nice part B story or part of an episode.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The next one is Honor. Mm-hmm. This one might be my favorite. I think this one would have added a lot to that season, because this is the season where Nog decides he wants to join Starfleet.
Yeah.
This is a big season for Nog. And this story shows a bit more self-doubt than we saw from him in the show, or adds at least a deeper layer to it, where he's worried his own Ferengi kind of instincts and stuff are going to run him afoul in Starfleet, and he doesn't want that to happen. So he's starting to question if he's even Starfleet material himself. Yeah. Early on. And, of course, Quark senses this because he has the lobe. So he sends... it just says here, run this down to cargo bay 6. Run this down to the cargo bay. But don't look in it.
Yeah.
Whatever you do not look inside this box. I can't believe he said that to a Ferengi teenager.
That's like putting a box on the floor, looking at a cat and saying, don't get in there.
You don't get in that box.
Before you're finished, the cat will be in the box saying, what? Oh, I wasn't listening at all, ever.
Continue what you were saying now from the box.
Yeah. I can hear you better.
Yeah. So he does, and of course he looks in it.
And
a message pops up that is speaking to a Centurion. And it says, it's for your eyes only, Centurion. After this message is viewed, it must be destroyed. You have been entrusted with the task to deliver this compound that one of our exploration teams discovered in the Gamma Quadrant. It is a highly toxic to our race and must be delivered to Cardassian Prime for antitoxin testing. If our enemies were to discover this chemical before our scientists discover an antidote, and if this chemical were to be released into our atmosphere, it would mean genocide for our race. Go, Centurion, guard this with your life. So, it would seem this is very dangerous compound for the Cardassian.
Absolutely.
All Cardassians. And he's forced to deliver it to these people who have masks on. He has no idea who they are.
Purple robes with these very featureless masks.
But he assumes they're Bajoran. So he's worried that it's going to be a rogue Bajoran faction that's going to exterminate the Cardassian people.
Right.
And they're like, that's cool, here's your latinum, blah, blah, blah. And he refuses. He's like, I didn't bring your merchandise with me. And so he does the Starfleet thing in the end, Because he says, you can't do that. He's like, Cardassians have done horrible things, but it doesn't give you the right to wipe out all the people of the entire race.
Yeah.
And then the people remove the masks in the robes, And who is it? It's Jake and Ron.
Oh,
Hi, this is Jake's idea.
I can totally see Rob being in on that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Do I get to wear the costume too?
But it was Jake's way of letting Nog prove to himself that he is Starfleet material, and I thought it was a nice friend moment and a nice moment for Nog.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And then they're like, how did you get Quark to participate in this? He doesn't want me to go to Starfleet Academy. And they're just like, that's a story for another time. So that would have been a great B-plot for another episode.
Indeed. That's one of those ones where paying back Quark is not the easy part.
Yeah, exactly. That was...
That
it's like we
cost
negotiated
Rob
with
a
Cisco. Well, I
lot
think
of
I
strips.
should be compensated for... Well, let's start off with change of my clothes and Impella's clothes. And, I think I should be compensated for my loss of business today, which I estimate as no less. And he's just thinking, he's like, how am I going to... Like 20 bars of that. Yeah, so good.
Yeah. It's a great story. Really
Yeah, I like
shines a beautiful light on Nog and Jake's friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And how, Rom and Jake really become family as well.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah.
And I think Jake got invited to those Armin Shimmerman Ferengi family weekend practice sessions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it'd be interesting, Jake's future career likely as a writer and journalist. What a scoop to be able to go talk, sit in and interview the Grand Negus every once in a while, right?
True.
Hey, Uncle Rom, how you doing?
Oh yeah, speaking of Ferengi religion, so who you get to see at the Divine Treasury is the Great Gint.
The Great Gint.
Mm-hmm.
And who's the Great Gint?
Gint was, I believe, the first Grand Nagus.
Okay.
Yeah, he's kind of king.
Nice.
Up
He's
there.
like their Soulless.
Yeah, basically.
Very nice.
Gint.
Koi Ginte Puglod.
It's like when Quark sees Gint, he's like, you look a lot like Rom.
I forgot. This isn't hell. This is hell.
Yeah, this is the Divine Treasury. It's so tacky.
This is a knockoff.
Yeah. So the last one we have here is Dangerous Times.
Yeah.
And this one...
This one is a very ambiguous story.
Yeah, and very short.
Yeah.
Garrick, Morn, Odo, Nog, all strolling down the promenade in different directions, of course.
Yeah.
That's not a group of people that would hang out together.
No.
I mean, Morn is a gregarious fella.
Oh, great company in any season.
Great storyteller.
Oh. What a wit.
And an explosion goes off. So many explosions on the promenade.
Yeah.
Flammable.
Yeah.
And
All that
then,
hydrogen gas.
just as the explosion is happening, somebody tries to put a transport beacon on Odo, which, of course, since he's malleable, he just spits it off instantly and turns around and grabs the guy. So that was a quick,
Yeah, very
quick
quick
capture.
investigation.
Yep.
It turns out this fella is from some kind of Federation extremist group
Yeah.
who wanted to experiment on...
Doesn't like them having a founder in their midst.
Yeah, and he said, you would have been great if I could get you back to our labs. So there's some kind of a group there. Now, one of the interesting things in this story to me, because we really get literally Odo's last line of the story is we just have so little information and so little to go on. One of the things that made me wonder about that is there's a panel early on where I think Cisco and Odo and Bashir are talking together, and if you look at that panel, they're talking, why this guy could have done this, what could possibly be his motives.
They're like, well, he's human, we know that much.
And now look at Bashir's face as he's walking away. He says, if you'll excuse me if I'm not needed here, and heads away. I wonder if he's walking into that room going, oh my goodness, Section 31 is all over this.
He's walking away like he knows something he's not telling them.
Absolutely.
It's a good drawing.
It really, it would have been a great B plot in, say, what about season 4, something like that. Just around the time we first see Section 31 start to start to poke their nose around him.
And then they find a Andorian freighter undocking without permission.
That's right.
And they're like, oh my, that's probably not a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
The prisoner's probably going to be aboard that Andorian vessel.
Oh, that's right, because there's another explosion, this time outside the brig.
Mm-hmm.
Knocks out the force fields.
And then they go to warp and get away.
Yeah, way faster than a little Andorian freighter should be able to go, and evaded their sensors and their tractor beam lock way more handily than a freighter should have.
Yep.
So
a lot of suspicious things happening here.
Yeah, and the bad guy gets away.
Yep.
And that's where the story kind of ends.
That's where it ends. There's so much we don't know. Just like us as readers don't know anything. They just set up.
It oddly reminded me of some of the early dialogues of Plato where Socrates just has a question, and in the end he's like, "Well, we know nothing."
Yep.
And he keeps on moving, and you're like,
"Oh, good talk. Thanks for the
gadfly,
the food.
Yeah,
I'm gonna leave now."
There's something. It kind of leaves you with an unfinished taste in your mouth.
Well, is there anything you would like to say to summarize religion in Star Trek?
Wow.
As we pack things up in the great beyond here.
Thank God it's over. End transmission. Well, all right. Okay. No references to benzites then.
Yeah, I just don't know if Plain Simple Tailors is gonna be the most fan-friendly name. We need to get as many people out to these shows as possible.
Well, let's appeal to their historical sensibility here.
We got to appeal to the youth. How about Galaxy's Children?
That's nice.
We could write a song called, like, Don't Cry Over Sour Milk.
That's true. Oh, man.
Or Hollow Expectations.
The Great Bird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not bad. I can see it. Well, how about this one? Okay, here we go. How about this one? April's Pike. Yeah. And we can just write Psychedelia of the Stars, volumes 1 through however many.
Well, we've got time at Warp 3.4 to write a few
That's
volumes.
the fastest this tub's gonna go.
Yeah.
I mean, we're what?
What did the Lessepian say?
We're 16 light years from Regulon, so I'm so glad this replicator makes a good potato soup, because we're going to be eating it for a while.
Yeah.
Oh.
First stop on the tour, Regulon.
Yeah, Regulon, then Trill.
Guess we'll just have to go for playing with Plain Simple Tailors for now. Oh, Trill, I've been working on my trills.
Nice. La, 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 la. Very good. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, it's a pretty packed
16-date tour?
16-date tour, if we still
to Galorndon Core.
If you still want to do Algernon. How can we not do Algernon? I mean, we're there.
You have a Romulan grandfather.
I do. It almost makes me want to stop at Charon first, too, but that might make the Romulans mad.
Make a few calls.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. It's either Ciatella or Charon's third last stop. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe we can get a Romulan agent. I hear there's a lot of those.
I hear there is too. Talshiar Product and Band Management Incorporated. LLP.
Well, let's practice.
All right, man, let's do it.
All right.